to order. Could we please have roll call? And please use your microphone.
Ms. Gaskin?
Present.
Ms. Weber?
Here.
Mr. Moldaver?
Here.
Ms. Rizzo Santino?
Present.
And Ms. Owens?
Here.
And we recorded that as a here for Ms. Owens. Thank you. We have the meetings from October 16th, 2019. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the draft minutes as submitted.
Lee, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, a second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Are there any agenda adjustments?
No.
No. And we have one member of the public speaking on an item not on the agenda. Daniel McCarter, please. And just to be clear, any member of the public may address the committee for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the committee that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Creeks Advisory Committee, my name is Dan McCarter. And this is just, didn't plan to be up here, except that I was in the Arroyo Burr Open Space Park the other day before yesterday, and I noticed something that I should bring to your attention. It really should probably go to the Parks Department, but as it's their park, but I'm here tonight, and I thought I should just advise you so that it can be checked out. But there's some construction going on Allen Road in Vista Del Mar, and they're pulling up water pipes, and they made a rubble pile of some water pipes near the entrance of the park, and looked like it might have been dated for asbestos. And so I asked one of the employees today of LASH, and they confirmed that it was in fact asbestos, and it is in a friable state, which means that it can produce particulate matter, which is hazardous to health and life ultimately. It should be treated as a hazardous materials, should be at least covered until they're finished. It's just exposed to the air, the dry, and the wind. And so just a kind of a heads up on that. If you're not sure, you can always call the fire department. They have a hazmat team, and they can go out there and analyze it, and but just thought I should bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarter, very much. Any other public comment? Hearing none. Committee member and staff communications. Committee member, any communications? Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just at a meeting earlier this week, and I was reminded that any member of the public who is really interested in how climate change could affect Santa Barbara County and the South Coast, there will be a free meeting at the Goleta Community Center on November 21st at 6:30. That will be moderated by Rachel Couch from the State Coastal Conservancy, and will include Dr. Charles Lester, former head of the State Coastal Commission, now the director of the Ocean and Coastal Policy Center for the University of California, Garrett Wong, the Climate Program Manager for Santa Barbara County, Dr. Lisa Stratton from the Cheadle Center for Biodiversity and Ecological Restoration, and Mo Lovegreen, the University of California's Director of Campus Sustainability. And best of all, it's free. So anyone in this room or watching or listening who wants to find out more, November 21st, 6:30, Goleta Community Center. Thank you.
And actually, that same day at 5:30, Food and Water Action will be hosting an event at La Casa de la Raza, 601 East Montecito Street from 5:30 to 7 p.m. on environmental and climate justice with several community partners, including EDC, Sierra Club, CAUSE, MyCop, and Liberes Campesinos.
Thank you both very much. Any other? And staff? None. All right, we'll move on to our first item of business, Andre Clark Bird Refuge Restoration Project update.
Okay, my name is George Johnson. I work for the Creeks Division. I'm going to be talking to you about the project today. So first off, we'll start with the project location. you can see, it's a little hard to see on this map, but there's some lines up here and it kind of basically shows you the watershed. It's 817 acres. The park itself is down here. It's 42 total acres and includes a 30-acre lagoon or lake there. And then the project will be out on the beach also in this location at the mouth of the lagoon. And that's pretty much the project area. And a little bit will occur over here on the tennis courts on the other side of the freeway. So historically, this is an old photo of the salt marsh when it was connected to Sycamore Creek here on the beach where the volleyball courts currently are. This is Cabrillo. This is where the zoo's at. Anyway, it was a salt flat and some dune habitat on the beach, and then this was where the water came out and it broke through out to the ocean at various locations between here and Sycamore Creek during the rainy season. So historic modifications in the 20s. There was some money given by Andrea Clark to create a wildlife preserve kind of basically here, and so they dredged out, this was a salt flat back then, they dredged it out in this location, and that red mark here shows you where they put a weir gate in or a little dam to dam the water up so that you had a big pool of water back there for open water bird habitat. And here's a comparison of the two. The islands here that you can see were created with the dredge spoils. This is what it used to look like, the salt flat, the dunes, and then again out on the beach, the lagoon towards Sycamore Creek. So existing conditions, you can see from this watercolor, it's not looking too good some parts of the year. It's shallow, anywhere from 2 feet deep. It doesn't have very good flushing because of the small watershed now. It's not connected to Sycamore Creek anymore. There's just not a very high volume of water in there, so it doesn't break through out across the beach berm frequently. It's high in nutrients because it's a sink for all the surrounding land use to drain into, but it doesn't drain out. It's got low dissolved oxygen, periodic odor events, and the bird and aquatic habitat because of that is not as good as it could be. Restoration goals, we're trying to improve that bird and aquatic habitat, improve water quality, DO, nutrients, and clarity. Those are the main things we're focusing on. DO is dissolved oxygen, and then be able to try to adapt to sea level rise a little bit with the flow of the water through in and out of the bird refuge. So there's the few main components to the project. They're here. We're going to create a treatment wetland up in the city's tennis center, which I mentioned earlier, which is across the freeway from the bird refuge. The main drain into the bird refuge from the watershed goes through that property and then under the freeway. And so we're going to do a small treatment wetland, about 3,700 square feet, to try to remove some of the nutrients out of that before it goes into the bird refuge. It'll be a low flow treatment, and then we're going to improve public access by installing a permeable walkway that's 10 feet wide and about 1,500 feet long on the north side of the lagoon. It's now just a dirt walkway, or mulch walkway, I should say. And so we're going to try to improve access to get more people out there enjoying the open space. Replace the weiring gate, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then restore some habitat on the beach, and finally, and then do some restoration on the islands in the perimeter of the lagoon. We'll be making some habitat lobes there, or some salt marsh lobes, and I'll explain that, and then manage the beach berm so that we can hopefully get the lagoon connected to the ocean more often. So here's a map, site plan kind of shows you, here's that treatment wetland I talked about. Here's the path that goes from the existing parking lot in Los Patos out to this turnaround. Here are the habitat lobes I talked about. If you see those right there, here's down on the beach. This is where the weir gate is located. That's where the weir gate will be replaced, and new tide gate, or the weir and the old gate will be replaced with 2 new tide gates and a weir. And the final thing, here's some dune habitat and salt marsh. This lagoon on the beach lagoon will be expanded a little bit, and some more salt marsh habitat down there, and then some more open water, and then the dunes on either side. So here's the treatment wetland site I talked about at the tennis center. We're going to have to remove this one tree in order to there'll be a notch cut in here, and the water will drain into this location. It'll be excavated down to about this elevation. The water will sit in there and slowly drain out to the downstream end of this channel. We'll periodically remove the vegetation to get those nutrients out of the system. So it's not going to be much of a habitat. I mean, there will be some habitat, but it's not being designed for habitat. Here's the multi-use path that's existing at the site. This is where we're going to connect to. Here is the location where the new path will be constructed. And this is facing east, looking towards the parking lot of Los Patos. Here's the weir I've been talking about. If people, now you can visually tell what it is. This is what dams the water up. The water spills over this, goes through and comes out these pipes on the other side of Cabrillo, and then empties into the ocean when there's enough water to do that. But it takes a pretty big rain event to fill this up and spill. And then the beach berm has to break through, and I'll show you a little bit more of that, but that beach berm is usually really high, and so it can't get over that berm unless we have like 3 or 4 inches of rain all at once. So that's that. You can look at the plans for the weir. The only thing you want to notice, there's going to be 2 gates on it. I want to point out that there's the shape of the gates themselves are kind of like the old ashtrays in old cars, but you'll be able to adjust them up and down so that they don't have to be just closed or open, but they can be we can keep them partially closed, partially. That just gives us a lot of flexibility, so that's why we went with that design. This is the dune and salt marsh restoration area. So again, here's the lagoon the beach lagoon. This is the area we're going to be excavating to enlarge that and then create sand dunes here also. Another shot from the other side, that's the ice plant on the volleyball side. Here's berm management. So the water comes out here. When this fills up and spills over that weir and there's enough water, it'll break over this berm here on the beach and spill out into the ocean. But that's only happened twice in like the last 8 or 10 years because it's been a drought and it just takes a lot of water for that to do it. Here's another picture of the berm. This is when it had just closed again in late spring, and so the water's not very far from the ocean. But you'll see in these next photographs here in this that the water is much further, and that's pretty much the condition it's in most of the time. So the idea of berm management is to get a small tractor out there and lower the sand level to a prescribed height. By Coastal Commission will tell us, this is how the elevation, and we will lower the sand down to that elevation, and then when the water fills up, it will more easily spill out over that. So what that means is that we will get connection to the ocean on smaller rain events. That's the bottom line. We'll only be doing this in the rainy season. We won't be draining the bird refuge in the summer or the dry months because that's not really how the natural systems in Southern California work. So we're going to try and emulate that system where you do it, where these things drain in the winter and the rainy season. We just want it to happen more frequently so that we can flush some of those nutrients out. The gates will also help. This is a picture of when it is actually flushing, to flush more of the water out. Right now, only the top layer goes out, and we want to get some of that fluff and nutrient layer that's built up on the bottom of the bird refuge to flush out into the ocean. So it's not really harmful in and of itself, but when it sits in the lagoon, it is. And so we want to try to remove that out of the system. These are the transition zones. I'll just go through these quickly. These are just this is where these habitat lobes are going to be created. And basically you can see here that it drops off very quickly. We're going to try to make habitat areas that gradually go down into the bird refuge. So there's some shallower areas for birds just for them to forage and hang out in, and it's not just a straight drop off into deeper water. We want to make that more gradual and put some salt marsh species out there, so it'll just improve habitat complexity at the site. And this side, a lot of single species. There's just kind of 2 species right there, Atriplex and then your bulrush. We want to remove some of that and get some more diversity in those locations. And then here, where we just have grass and Myoporum, we're going to remove that and replace it with native species. Not all of the grass, but some of it, just to get a little bit better buffer for the bird refuge also for habitat purposes and water quality. So transition, these were those these are those lobes I was talking about, where we're going to create shallower wetland areas on the edge of the bird refuge there. There's 3 locations, I think, where we're doing that. So timeline, we're working through permitting. We've submitted a permit application to the city. They're reviewing it. We hope to have our permits and environmental review done by April, and then by May have our Coastal Commission approval, possibly into June, and then our final design plans. We go to bidding in June, start construction probably mid-July, maybe late July, but sometime in that time frame, and then complete by the end of November of next year. This is the cost. It's about $2 million total right now, we're figuring. We have about $1,350,000 in the current budget. We're going to have $500,000 added to it next fiscal year, so we're pretty close to that $200,000. We're requesting a grant. I mean, we're applying for a grant from Department of Fish and Wildlife right now, so we'll see if we're successful on that. That's it. If you have any questions. That's a real old photo.
Any questions? I actually have 2.
Sure.
The first, there was some consideration of an additional platform along Cabrillo,
Yes,
and I'm wondering the status of that.
that has been removed from the plans.
So access to the 3 remaining platforms will
Yes.
still be
Yes.
preserved?
Yep.
Okay.
I was trying to
And,
go back to the overall plan, but there it is. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the trail will end right here. Right now, there's a bunch of non-natives here that we're going to be
Right.
removing and putting in, and then this area is fenced now. It's going to continue to be fenced.
okay,
We have a few homeless issues back there. We're going to hopefully put a little better fencing in and try to keep that an area that's just a little wilder for the birds to nest and hang out.
okay. So no change?
Pardon? There's one platform here, and then here, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, one there and then one there. I can't see very well, sorry.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
all going to stay there.
Right.
And we're also looking at making one of them ADA accessible with the path. Not all 3, but just one.
So it was a cost issue about that additional platform?
No, we got input from people that it wasn't really valuable because we were going to remove one and
No,
install the other.
I understand.
Oh,
No, last time we talked, it was about adding an additional platform in lieu of some of the scenarios you had considered in the past.
there was one here
Yeah.
in this location.
No, I
Oh.
understand. Right. I'm talking about along Cabrillo. We can go offline
Oh,
on
on
this.
Cabrillo, sure. No, we ended up not pursuing another platform along Cabrillo.
I understand, right.
Yes.
They answer that, and was that a cost issue?
Part of it was cost, and it was a little late in the process. We got involved in trying to see if whether a bridge as an alternative under Cabrillo was valuable, and so that kind of took all of our consultants' time and energy, and adding another with the access to this location, we just decided, look, there's 3 platforms. That seems to be pretty good. So we're gonna keep it at that, and we just didn't pursue it. But it's not something we couldn't add if there's real support for it. We just felt like 3 was enough at that location.
Madam Chair, I would just add, as part of our discussions, because I was involved with those discussions with George, and one of the reasons for adding those lobes on the south side along Cabrillo there is to improve habitat for birds. And one of the concerns we have was if we put a platform next to the lobe or in
this
between those
location.
lobes, it would actually, the activity on that platform would actually disrupt the birds, and it would kind of offset some of the benefit we were getting. And so it's kind of trying to balance the interests of birders who would love to
Right.
get out there and see them with, it wouldn't be just birders that use that, or it wouldn't be
Right.
it wouldn't be only people coming to see the birds. It would be
No
just
question.
increased public activity in
Right.
that area. And so we were trying to kind of protect the habitat interests there,
Okay.
and then leave the remaining accessible platforms on the other
Yeah.
side.
Right. So in other words, we're keeping status quo. And all of the scenarios that we had talked about in the past are parked relative to the platforms.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, my second question, is the nutrient source principally from the golf course?
Well, we can't say for sure where the nutrients are from, but golf courses do use a lot of fertilizers in order to keep the greens and the grass green. And so it's a pretty safe assumption that a lot of nutrients come off of that. But there are residential areas and larger estates style properties further up in the watershed, and they do tend to use fertilizers to keep their properties green. So yeah, but it's also the fact that it just never drains. Like we have high nutrient levels in a lot of our creeks, but they flush periodically, and this doesn't really do that. So
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll move to Arroyo Borough Open Space Restoration Project, Phase 2.
Good evening. I'm Erin Markey, the Creeks Restoration Planner in the Creeks Division, here to talk to you today about a second phase of work out at the Arroyo Borough Open Space Park. So this is the open space. It's 21 acres in size down at the lower end of the watershed, currently accessed from the end of Allen Road. We just recently completed the 4-acre restoration project along the main stem of the creek through here, just at the end of last year. And the second phase of work would really focus on the northern portions of the park, kind of up in this zone. Sorry, there's the delay. So as part of the community outreach that was done for the Phase 1 project, we met with a lot of neighbors. We had some stakeholder meetings. We also had a bunch of committee reviews as part of the design review for the process. We received a lot of feedback of other future potential things that could be done out at the open space park. We also heard about things people didn't want to see out there, like bathrooms or picnic tables. And at this point, there's no desire for a parking lot. But we took that kind of input that we received and came up with a potential second phase of work that we might do out there. We had some meetings last May out at the site, but also we met with the Stone Creek Condo Association was having an HOA meeting, so we went and spoke with them as well. And then we're planning, obviously we're here today to talk to you guys to get input from our advisory committee. And then we have a community meeting scheduled for next Wednesday as well at the Watershed Resource Center to do another round of public input on these concept designs now that we have concept designs. So the main components we're looking into for this second phase of work includes the restoration of the Campanile tributary drainage. So I'll go into a little more detail on all of these, but this is kind of just a rough overview. Improvement of the existing informal trail routes on site, so create better drainage, reduce slopes. We're proposing a pedestrian bridge at the north end of the park to create a connection to the future multi-use bike path along Las Positas Road. And as part of that, we're looking to relocate the existing water main that crosses the creek near that location to the underside of the proposed bridge, which will allow us to do some restoration at that location. In addition, we're proposing native plantings to all the restoration areas, but additionally along some of the new proposed trail routes. Oh, sorry, I had some photos of, so this is one of the steep sections of trails we're looking to reroute. Example of the bridge down across Mesa Creek, which would be really similar to what we would be proposing here. And then areas where we'd like to improve the trails and provide some additional native planting along them. So these are the concept plans that our design engineers Waterways Consulting has been working on. And I'm going to go through in a little more detail each of these elements. So the Campanile tributary drainage is up here. on the west side of the site, it's really more of an ephemeral wash, meaning that it flows when there is rain and for a short period of times after heavy rain. And based on aerial images, historic ones, it looks like at some point in the 30s, it was kind of channelized to the north end of the property here. And this whole meadow area was farmed, so likely it was kind of channelized to constrain it and keep it out of the farmed area. Additionally, previous to the city taking ownership of the property, there was all sorts of grading out in this area for bike jumps and other recreational activities. And there was evidence of kind of like berming up along the southern edge of it to kind of keep it in that location. So the restoration of this area would really focus on letting that drainage spread out again, kind of letting it meander through that whole alluvial meadow. So it would involve some grading to kind of remove those physical constraints and let it do that. It would also involve the removal of likely a few eucalyptus trees right in the middle of that area. The grove on the north end would likely remain. And then in addition, we would revegetate the area with appropriate native wetland species. In addition, as where the trail crosses the north end here, we're proposing kind of like an elevated boardwalk so that the drainage channel itself still has room to laterally migrate underneath there, and then also to kind of keep pedestrian traffic out of the wetland habitat and protect the wetland resources there. So I'll point out the existing trail routes are shown here as these dashed gray lines. The orange is the new proposed trail routes. So you'll see that there's no changes proposed along the existing Creekside Trail. That's going to remain as is, as well as the trail from the entrance gate to the middle of the property is also going to remain as is. So this upper loop trail, we're looking to kind of formalize the route, bring in a little more bends and meanders to bring some interest, but also pull it up slope a little ways to keep it further from this tributary drainage area. And then the main cross trail here is, as you can see here, it's really wide right now. It's really straight. We're going to try and bring in some bends and meanders, do some planting along the edge to provide some shade. You'll notice that this section is quite a bit wider than the others, and that's because we're maintaining emergency fire access through the middle portion of the park. So this section is 25 feet wide as proposed. It's currently quite a bit wider, although it changes from year to year on how that gets mowed, but we're looking to kind of formalize these routes a little more. And then at this upper location, the current trail route is really steep. It's about 12% slope. So we're looking to actually reroute it in through some existing trees to reduce the slope, just provide better access, and then also reduce erosion and rilling as this steep section has had in the past. And then the other major component as part of this would be the proposed pedestrian bridge across Arroyo Burro. As hopefully most of you know, the city is proposing a Class 1 multi-use bike path all along Modoc and Las Positas Road. So this pedestrian bridge would provide a connection to that future bike path. As part of that project, they're also looking to put a crosswalk across Las Positas Road to connect the path to Elings Park. So that would allow pedestrian users access from the open space park to Elings Park as well. We considered a few different locations and alignments, and the most viable location was at the north end of the park, where this is shown. It has sufficient space for kind of a landing and connection to the bike path, whereas some other locations downstream just didn't have that. The bridge would be really similar to what we've installed down across Mesa Creek at the Douglas Preserve. It's a little bit longer. This is an 85-foot long bridge. That's a 72-foot bridge. The travel width would be 6 feet and really geared towards pedestrian access. And then as part of this, we're also proposing, it's sort of hard to see on this plan sheet, but there's a 10 by 4 kind of platform on the southern end of the bridge, a kind of viewing platform that would allow creek visitors to hang out and look at the creek. A great opportunity to have some interpretive signage, as well as it would really overlook the first floodplain terrace that we created as part of the first phase of restoration work out here. So give an opportunity to let people see that and see as it changes over time. And then in addition, we're looking at relocating this existing water line that's a few feet upstream. We're working with our Water Resources Department on that, and it's a 12-inch water main that's currently within the 100-year water surface elevation. So by relocating it to the underside of the bridge, we'd actually be elevating it 5 feet higher, so it would be better protected into the future during high storm events. And for us, we also can do some restoration here. So currently there's rock riprap revetment all the way to the top of bank on the left side of the creek here, and then pipe and wire revetment on the other side. So we'd be taking all of that out, laying those banks back, and restoring them with natives. So that would add about another 100 feet of creek restoration to the first phase that we've already completed. Yeah, and then I guess I would just say one more thing. These green bubbles are the rough outlines of areas we've targeted to do some additional planting. So just to reiterate some of the expected project benefits, we'd be restoring that tributary drainage off Campanile. There'd be the expansion of native habitat on site, as well as water quality improvements, creek bank restoration, and then the benefit to the water line being in a more secure and safe space in the future. Improved park access and experience through the second park entrance, through the creation of the pedestrian bridge, but also through the trail improvements out on site. And then connecting park visitors to the watershed, we see as a great benefit of this project, both through the elevated boardwalk across that tributary drainage, the bridge itself, and the viewing platform on the bridge. Just really letting people connect to the creek and the watershed. And then lastly, the increased benefit of the pedestrian connection to that bike path. And this purple line shows the proposed route of that Class 1 bike path, and all the nearby kind of communities and open space parks that people would have the opportunity to connect to. So our next steps, like I mentioned, we have another community meeting next week at the Watershed Resource Center. We're continuing to target potential grant funds for the implementation of the project. I'll mention, already submitted an initial application to the California Natural Resource Agency's Trails and Greenways grant program. It just was a really good fit for this project, so we submitted an initial application for that. And then we're hoping to have our 65% designs complete around the beginning of next year. We'll be getting started with our environmental permitting here very shortly, in hopes of getting that wrapped up in April or late spring next year. And then start construction bidding in May, with an estimated construction start date of late August or September next year. And we're expecting about 2 months to complete the heavy equipment construction work, and about a month to complete the landscaping, in order to be complete in December. And we're trying to stay on that schedule in order to complete the bridge components prior to the bike path getting started with construction in this location. Their current schedule is to get started early next year up on Modoc, and then work their way down Las Positas. So our understanding is they won't be getting started in the Las Positas area until January 2021. And with that, I'll take questions.
Actually, if it's okay with the committee, Chair Gaskin had to step away. So if it's okay with the committee, we do have one public speaker slip from Daniel McCarter. And if we can invite him up, he can make his comments, and then we can have questions and comments from the committee. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Cameron. And my name is Dan McCarter, and greeting the the chair and the Creeks Advisory Committee. What's left? Overall, I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm like, this looks pretty cool. Nice job, Aaron. The design. There's a couple of red flags, and I guess the devil's in the details, and probably things can be worked out. But I just want to do some due diligence. So I'm speaking basically to item 3, the 85-foot bridge over the Arroyo Burro Creek. And I understand this is for discussion, so I'm just putting this out there for that discussion. And one of my concerns is that Measure B funding would be used for a park bridge and other amenities. Measure B is for creek restoration and clean water projects. And I'm not sure what the nexus between Park Bridge and clean water is. I'd like to keep as much of Measure B monies available for focusing on clean water projects. And as you may recall, the No on Why campaign made it pretty clear that a bridge, no matter how well designed, the best in the world, still degrades water quality and creek functions. So that's one point, is just just want to make sure that Measure B funds are appropriate for some of this project. Now, there was a meeting that was held at the end of Allen Road with the creek staff ended with all parties seemingly, and I might have misunderstood, but seemingly agreed on the need to first evaluate the performance of the multi-use path before further pursuing the bridge. There are some concerns about the sudden and unexpected bridge development plan with a completion date in the fall of 2020, less than a year away, was not discussed at that meeting. And I just wonder if the bridge will receive the same scrutiny as would a private bridge, and a fair and thorough public process is what we expect. And then Public Works designed the multi-use path to meet all pedestrian transportation needs in the Las Positas Valley to include easy access to the Arroyo Burro open space. Connectivity was paramount in their decision and in their design. City Public Works planners did consider a bridge option, but rejected it as being inferior. The question is, and I think the bottom line is, do we need two paths, one on each side of the creek going to the same beach? And this puts the public access to the front and backyards of every house on the creek side of Allen Road. The bridge creates a redundant and unnecessary carbon footprint, a short cut through a fragile and heavily publicly impacted neighborhood to serve more tourist adventurous on e-bikes. These additional neighborhood impacts are maybe over the top. I think the bottom line is that we like the idea of a bridge, and this design looks, very, very attractive. Our concern is a public bridge or a pedestrian bridge, and we'd like it. We could agree with this if it was in fact a pedestrian bridge. And our fear is that it will be another multi-use path and the demonstration of what the bridge is going to look like is the one that's over the Mesa Creek, and that is that's a multi-use bridge. And so what we'd like to do, and I'm sure that, if we looked around, there might be something out there or some way to configure a design that limits passage of the bridge to pedestrians. And I think if we can reach that point, we could have consensus on this from the community. So, so the three takeaways is, is it Measure B? Is that appropriate? And then the permit process, just because it's kind of being fast-tracked, and we just want to make sure that our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And then a pedestrian bridge. Thank you very much.
Okay, if the committee would like, I can respond to those questions. Yes, and then we'll move on to questions and comments from the committee. First of all, with respect to Measure B funds, I think it's a good question, and I appreciate that Mr. McCarter's here tonight to ask that. The city and the Creeks program has worked very, very hard over the last 20 years to be true to the use of Measure B funds and what the voters were told and what the intent of Measure B was. Historically, we have used Measure B funds for a bridge project. The bridge at Mesa Creek, as part of that restoration, is what we're looking at for this project, and we use Measure B funds for that bridge. So it had been done back in the early days of the Creeks division. One of the things that the bridge allows for is it allows for access for people to come to the creek and learn about the creek. So it's really an important part of our watershed education efforts. And in this particular location, it's pretty difficult to access anywhere near the creek or even get a view of the water in the creek. And so this bridge allows people to have that access. And part of the design here includes interpretive signage at the bridge area so that people can learn about the watershed and the specific location they're at in the watershed. And that helps us with regard to public education about watersheds as well as water quality education opportunities. The notion that we're fast tracking the bridge, I mean, the bridge is a concept that came up during our phase 1 discussions with the neighbors and other stakeholders, and has continued throughout the process. We're still we're moving the project along as diligently as we can, but that's our normal rate of reviewing and approving projects. And so, if we are able to get the design completed and we get our permits, we're planning to move forward with construction of the entire project, or this phase, next fall. And so it's not a particularly fast track for the normal rate that we design and construct projects. And then lastly, I'll make sure, the intention is to design a pedestrian bridge. The multi-use path, I think, is a 12-foot wide path that's going down Las Positas and Modoc. This bridge is we're designing to be 6 feet wide, so it's half the width. We would be interested in talking with Mr. McCarter or anybody else that has concerns about possible designs that would prevent people from riding bikes across the bridge or causing any kind of hazard to anybody else that's crossing the bridge. But the bridge that's at Mesa Creek is what we're looking at. The one that was shown in the picture is what we're looking at for a model. And I think our transportation division at the city would not consider that a multi-use path. It's half the size of what they are building as a multi-use path. It wouldn't be adequate to be considered a Class 1 bike path or anything like that. It's really designed and intended to be for pedestrian use, so we can continue to work at other design issues. I don't know if we can really get narrower and still have it safe for people to, for pedestrians to cross each other on the bridge. But we can look at other ways to discourage bicycles and things from going across the bridge. In addition to that, talking about electric bikes and things like that, the open space is not intended to be used, and it's not allowed to have any kind of mechanized bicycles or vehicles or anything like that in the open space. So those aren't supposed to be there anyway. So I think I've answered all of those things. It is an attempt. Oh, there's one other representation just about accessing the beach. The people could use the bridge to go across from the multi-use path to the open space and to potentially down Allen Road to the beach. But really, the intent is we have a new public open space that the city has purchased for all of the city residents, and this is a access point to the open space from a multi-use path, and people can or from Elings Park down to check out the open space. And so it's just access to the park itself that's really important in what we're looking at. Oh, and one last thing with regard to the Measure B funds. As always with these projects, we look for opportunities to secure grant funds. As Erin mentioned during her presentation, we have an application submitted. It's for a pot of money that specifically looks to provide access to these kind of green open spaces. And so we're hopeful that we will be successful with that application. And if we are, the amount that we've applied for funding pays for not just the entirety of the bridge, but some of the restoration as well. Thanks, and I'd be happy to answer any other follow-up questions or any comments.
I want to thank Mr. McCarter for his 3 points, and I'm sure Ms. Markey is pleased that the members of the public are tracking your project so carefully. But I also, as we're only a couple of weeks away from Thanksgiving, I hope people at home who are watching the project can appreciate the depth of research and thought that Erin and her team in the department and George and his team at the Bird Refuge have given, looking at costs, contingencies, time, permit, the public at large, the immediate neighbors, what's best for the watershed, for the wildlife. And just from your presentations, although they were brisk, I think people could, fathom the depth of your research and all the options that you've weighed. So I, for one, are very grateful for both of your presentations.
I'm just curious if you guys have seen an increase since you've done kind of the phase one of usage of that and had any other feedback on all the improvements that have been made.
So we definitely saw a little uptick in use right after the ribbon cutting. I think there was some press coverage of the project that made people interested in, where is this park? I've never been there. Come check it out. But I think that's already kind of tapered off. So that's one of the things we really look forward to with this potential project is increasing access, making people more aware of the property and the project that was done. But we also have received emails or just being out at the site and seeing people out there. We've seen people give us praise for what was done with phase one.
Okay.
I was just, as a trial balloon, going to consider wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving as part of my motion to adjourn. Is that possible?
Take
So
it away, Eddie.
then I so move.
Okay. Is a second? Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So, all in favor of adjourning? Okay. Adjourn, and a happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thank you.
2. 1, 2, 3. Hey!